you very much, Tim, for that warm welcome, and thank you and good morning, dear colleagues and friends. In his 1992 Nobel lecture, Fragments of an Epic Memory, St. Lucian poet and playwright Derek Walker described the diasporic identities of the Caribbean archipelago as a vividly kinetic gathering of broken pieces, and he spoke of memory that yearns to join the center, a limb remembering the body from which it has been severed. The way that the Caribbean is still looked at, illegitimate, rootless, monoliths. Break a vase, he postulated, and the love that reassembles the fragments is stronger than that love which took its symmetry for granted when it was whole. Now, I entered this discourse on the issues being raised at this conference through my pursuit of another piece of research and writing that I was working on earlier this year and late last year. I was pursuing pineapples, futures, and paintings. While happily pursuing my research on all of these things, in a Caribbean context, they were the activity of two completely separate projects, and were proceeding quite happily side by side, one taking an art historical approach to unraveling intriguing instances of the representation of pineapples, largely through associated imagery in the context of decorative art production and visual art production in the West Indies, and the other as a museum director, and again as an art historian, on the projection of colonial power and presence in the production of three major 17th and early 18th century paintings of Bridgetown and the island of Barbados. So freshly on the conclusion of the first project, I was idly continuing on my researches of the other, when watched appearing on the Google searches, then the Durham Park painting, who knows as well, the front image of this conference's program, and scanning through the contents of this program, I knew that I had to be present today to revel in the riches of your research. I have the opportunity, therefore, to learn and grow as a director of one of the Caribbean's older institutions, the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, which is celebrating and commemorating its 90th anniversary this year, even as it moves towards a major review and reorganization of its core exhibits, keeping in mind this critical work is necessary to help our communities, both in the island and diasporically, to comprehend the value and importance of institutions such as my own. So while the BMHS is neither the child of the 19th century or early 20th century colonial mission, nor the agent of the region's mid to late 20th century independence movement, at least for the Anglophone countries, it was definitely the legacy of both these projects, so that while it does have a significant collection of around 700 pieces of silverware in its collection, primarily of 19th and early 20th century pieces, there are some pieces which are of 18th century manufacture, and even a few older pieces of 17th century work, though the latter are largely religious pieces, held still in church collections. But none of these have really been subject to any specialized scrutiny apart from a very small selection, including a silver slave brand, colonial coinage, and similar accoutrements related to the construction and ownership of Main Spade, and is still working its way through the shoals of redefining the museum's mission in the 21st century. I want to illustrate this point while recalling a few case histories, which remain meaningful to me. The necessity of doing better work, of joined up thinking in a number of different ways. Now, in his manuscript, Mortem in Parvo, or Taylor's history of his life and travels in America and other parts, the 17th century English mathematician and traveler Reverend John Taylor observed during his visit to Jamaica in 1687 the extravagant lifestyle of merchants who enjoyed, and I quote, the heights of splendor, in full ease and plenty, being sumptuously arrayed and attended on and served by their Negro slaves. However, he also observed the profusion of craftsmen who quickly established businesses in Port Royal, indicating that, I quote, there are now set here on this port all sorts of mechanics and tradesmen, as smiths, carpenters, bricklayers, joiners, turners, cabinet makers, tanners, curriers, shoemakers, tailors, hatters, upholsterers, rope makers, glaziers, painters, carvers, armorers, and comb makers, and watermen. All which live here very well, earning thrice the wages given in England, by which means they are able to maintain their families much better than in England, by which tradesmen 'tis much advanced, both in strength and wealth, still becoming more formidable, and will undoubtedly the next age be a most pleasant, rich, and uberous habitation. So Taylor's description graphically depicts the growing prosperity of Port Royal, which was quickly becoming Jamaica's principal port and the center of growing prosperity in Jamaica. And he also identified various ways in which craftsmanship quickly became indicative of the rapid changes in the colonialist rate of adaptation from subject to citizen within the colonial context. Now, on the other hand, I want to mention a similar observation made by Père Labat and his visit to Barbados in 1700, which reminds us of the importance of first-hand observation as setting a context for the source of some critical research. He states of Bridgetown, the town is fine and noble, its streets are straight, long, clean, and well intersected. The houses are well built in the English style, with many glass windows. They are magnificently furnished. The shops and merchant warehouses are filled with all one could wish from all parts of the world. One sees numerous goldsmiths, jewelers, clockmakers, and other artificers who do much work. The largest trade in the New World is carried on here. Labat later in his work, describing the intricate workmanship of two goldways, saying that this work is of perfection of these sorts of craftsmen in Barbados. And later still, following his visits to the countryside, he observes that the houses on the plantations are much better built than those in the towns. They are large, with good fenestration, completely glazed. The arrangements of rooms is commodious and comfort is well understood. One notices the opulence and good taste of the inhabitants in their magnificent furniture and silver, of which they have considerable quantities, of an order which, if the island were captured, this commodity alone would be worth more than the loss of a few galleons. It is not until we do the research, gather the evidence, and share the knowledge that we can really draw an accurate picture of what took place in the Caribbean. And even then, we must be acutely aware that the archival, artistic, architectural, and archaeological records must be identified, mined, and interrogated to really comprehend the role enslaved and free Africans played side by side with some of the metal workers named. Some of these Africans were skilled metal workers, transported unknowingly across the ocean from West Africa and even East Africa and points in between. What expertise and skills might they have brought to the table? Only an investigation of population counts, insurance and tax records, household accounts, covering urban dwellings, might reveal evidence of their existence and contribution. Essentially, therefore, we're still in the process of building up our knowledge of Caribbean decorative arts history and uncovering evidence of its origins, its processes, its materials, its tools, its sources and spaces, its influences and its foundations, and of course, its practitioners and its knowledge bearers. Now, Michel Foucault, his notion of naming and power, where power creates specific knowledges, and similarly, specific knowledges create power. Disassembling the existing power base of having our practices, our processes, our places, and our prodigies remaining as being named colonially in the past is no longer acceptable. Recognizing and controlling the narrative becomes increasingly critical if we are to properly respond to Derek Walker's insistence on the importance of recovering and reassembling the fragments of Caribbean history, memory, and identity, eliminating the gaps and discordances, which, he says, which took its symmetry for granted when it was whole. Foucault's thesis suggests the value and importance of decolonizing the codified epistemologies which is set in place, a neutrality of conditioning to authorizing identification of erasure of aspects of Caribbean heritage, inasmuch as knowledge is not a thing, but a process realized in action. For historians of art and craft, science and technology, archaeologists and art historians, anthropologists and sociologists, if we are to disrupt the authorizing practices of the past, we need to develop partnerships, sharing in the identification of three major practices of knowledge ownership: performance, use, and naming. And these resonate with the essential research still needed on different ways of knowing the Caribbean network in practice, in bodies, in materials, and rendered through our own forms of codification of knowledge, which respects the capacities of Caribbean craftsmen. To conclude, in consultation with our conservator about where she would look beyond the archive, she proposed a reconstruction of 17th or 18th century silverware workshop. This workshop will include various tools, materials, and the space needed for producing such silverware during that time. And she points out that the spaces needed for silver production were not that large. Time doesn't permit me to go over all of her proposals for sources of evidence of silver production, but it does reveal much beyond the named or unnamed bodies of historicized individuals, and suggests an approach which would help in supporting the knowledge reduction we spoke of. So here, let me take this opportunity once again to thank the Silver Society, its president and organizing committee for having planned and delivered on such a special project, and their generosity in allowing me to say a few words in helping to open the doors for the Caribbean to recover its rich and meaningful heritage of self-production for generations